Precedent for change. We don't think of it that way, but it is filled with precedent for change, as being identified as the source of life. We have it in this Old Testament reading that we heard from Solomon. And Solomon has built a temple. He's done a new thing. Created a new house for God, for the God of Israel. But in his prayers and supplications to that God, as he dedicates that temple, he prays something new. He doesn't just pray that this be a place of worship for the people of Israel, but that it be a place of worship for all people of the world, for foreigners who might come and turn to that place for prayer, as well as for the people of Israel, as well as for the son of David. He's doing something new. Another innovation that we miss is that up until then, the temple worship of the people of Canaan had very much believed that the god or goddess of worship in the temple was right there, imbued in the statue or the image. So Solomon does something new that challenges the Canaanites in the area. He says, how could this God who is so great possibly be contained here? So he's doing a challenge in both directions. And he had a great wisdom that exuded and exemplified not just tolerance for those differences, but an invitation and continually led people into dialogue. He was highly criticized for establishing relationships with non-Israelites and showing their preference in trade. And yet, his created the most peaceable kingdom of that world. Now, this precedent for change, for doing something different, continues to become the tradition that Jesus talks about, introduces, and asks of his apostles and followers. Now, the tradition of Passover that held those images of bread and wine, images that evoked the journey through the desert of the Hebrew people to a new place, that they had to go on that journey with so little and had to trust in God so much, that many times they felt they were physically hungry. They, in fact, were spiritually fed in profound ways. And so Jesus continues to be an image of spiritual feeding. Basically, at this point in the lectionary cycle of the year, preachers can kind of throw up their hands and be quite annoyed. This is the 4th Sunday in a row that we've had the images of bread and wine. And they'll go, well, what else am I going to say about this? It's bread and wine, bread and wine, bread and wine. I get it! Now, the thing about the Episcopal tradition is, one of our innovations over time was, it wasn't always the practice that we had Eucharist on every Sunday. That can feel strange to us now because we do. But many of you who even attend here might remember a time under other clergy in which that was the case. You might have had a Eucharist once a month. The rest of the time you would have had a protracted prayer service. But the tradition began to understand as essential to our identity this idea that the image of bread and wine as a commemorative meal of Christ is a profound connection to God. One that spiritually feeds us, even with just a sip of wine and a tiny bit of bread. We are spiritually fed fully. Now, this then asks us, because it's something that's so usual to us, to take this season to really reflect on that mystery, to reflect on it like a gem with several facets that we're asked to continually turn and look at from a new angle, this bread and this wine. What is it imaging for us? This set of readings today, as I read that letter from Christians in Ephesus. I was particularly struck by the cultural and historical setting, to be reminded, firstly, that the context in which he's writing is he's in prison. He's been imprisoned as a Roman citizen, very important, Roman citizen, in the Empire of Rome, in which he was born and has rights as a Roman citizen for several generations of Roman occupation and empire. The experience is one of high militarization. Roman soldiers wearing armor. And he is essentially there being guarded, imprisoned by these very kinds of people. Men in armor provides from that place a profound new understanding of what Christian armor looks like. Now, first off, still in Christian tradition, many expressions, that idea of soldiers in armor can perhaps be antithetical, and has been used many times antithetically to the very values that Christ is espousing. Not to say that when one is called to duty to protect one's people, one will do that with courage and bravery. But also that the values that we're asked to bring into the world as Christians, into whatever dark places of our personal lives or our world, are those spiritual pieces of truth and justice and compassion and good news of peace. At the last, peace. The only parallel that I come to in my own life as an example of what Paul is perceiving and trying to get to about spiritual warriorship, I find in the images of the Lakota people. The Lakota Native people have many, many warrior societies historically, at least 9 that are sort of raised up in history. Among those societies, there are specializations of spiritual warriorship. And of course, all of them, at some point in their lives, people who belong to these societies, have done the service to the people of protection, have done the service of needing to fight the fight of